So this is really interesting. Samsung came out with their 3 new premium Galaxy tablets in the Tab S8 lineup, and they vary in price by as much as $700. But yet, the spec sheets look nearly identical. So I think that begs the question of what did they actually change between the cheapest model, the middle model, and the most expensive one, and which is actually the best model to get. So of course the 3 models that we have here, the newest one, or the most exciting of the 3, is the Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra. Now they all came out at the same time, it's not really the newest one, but I mean it's the one that got the most attention because it didn't exist in the previous lineups. Before we had the Galaxy Tab S7, which the sequel here is the S8, and we had the S7 Plus, which the sequel here is the S8 Plus. We didn't have an Ultra, but now we do. So that is obviously the most expensive one, but let's talk a little bit more about what these models have in common before we talk about what makes them different. Because like I said, the $700 price difference is really significant. They all have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, they have the same base storage of 128 gigabytes and 8 gigs of RAM. They also have expandable SD card storage, they have one USB Type-C port, the expandable storage goes up to 1 terabyte, they have the exact same S Pen that now has a really low latency thanks to some AI on board that kind of predicts where the pen's going. They have the same rear cameras, 12 megapixels for the wide angle and 6 for the ultra wide. They all have 45-watt charging. They don't have wireless charging in any of these. And on top of that, the screens also all have 120 hertz refresh rate with pretty much all the same software. There's a couple of exceptions we'll talk about later on in the video, but they're all running Android. They're all running the latest One UI. And so with that, the spec sheet, they look like almost the same device, with the difference mostly being the size. And that gets us into the design of these tablets, because the first and the most important difference to note, obviously, is going to be the size. But I'm not just going to read off the specs of the size. I've actually been using these, and I want to talk about the implications of the difference in size. For example, the Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra has a much larger keyboard, and because of that, you're able to have a much more natural typing experience. So if you're trying to use this for any kind of functional purposes, the S8 Ultra is going to, at least for most people with larger hands, allow you to type a lot faster with a smaller learning curve coming from any other standard keyboard out there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start off with the dimensions of these laptops. The smallest one has an 11-inch display. I think it looks really nice. It's 120 hertz, like I said. It's 2560 by 1600, but the difference here between this and the other two is that this is an LCD display. The other two are going to be Super AMOLED, which have some differences with contrast and brightness and visibility and daylight and things like that. So it's definitely one of the biggest hits to this model compared to the other two. And we'll talk about how the other two I think are really much more similar, but the LCD display, if you're using it indoors, is still a really solid display. Like I said, I've been using the Galaxy Tab S7 for the past year and a half, 2 years, and I really did like that. You don't really notice that it's that different unless you're looking at it from a slightly different angle. Sometimes you have a little bit of shade or a little bit of vignette around the outside of the display, but for the most part, a lot of people probably won't see that as a massive deal there. Now, the next one up is the Galaxy Tab S8 Plus, which has a 12.4-inch Super AMOLED display. So you're looking at a 1.4-inch increase. Sounds subtle, but again, when you're talking about things like the keyboard, it really does start to make a pretty big difference in my opinion. Additionally, having that larger display gives you a lot more real estate for drawing and taking notes. And of course, because some people will be using this to replace a laptop, as I talked about in my previous video, having a slightly larger display than 11 inches, I think really helps. Like every inch at this level really makes a big difference there. But the Galaxy Tab S8 Plus versus the S8 Ultra really have a similar display. The only difference there, in my opinion, is going to be the size. If you're looking at 12.4 inches for the Plus versus a whopping 14.6 for the Ultra, and that's going to be much more in line with what we're seeing on a lot of laptops. But that has both pros and cons. The larger display, of course, is really nice if you're trying to have, like I said, that wider keyboard, if you want to kind of multitask and have several things on the screen at once. But the downside is kind of, it lacks some of the benefits that a lot of tablets have, being something like the Galaxy Tab S8 is a lot smaller. It's more portable. If you're using this for field work, it slips in a backpack and it just takes up a lot less space and it weighs a lot less. Similarly, the Tab S8 Plus is slightly larger, but nowhere near as large as the Ultra. Now, with the size difference, of course, you also have battery life differences as well. So 8,000 milliamp hours on the smallest one versus 10,000 versus 11,000. numbers like that, I know a lot of people, like, it doesn't, I mean, for me as well, it doesn't really make sense, like what's, bigger screen, bigger battery. When it comes to battery life with these, the playback time varied slightly, but not too substantially. So the Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra had the battery life of about 14 hours, which was really impressive in my opinion. Slightly less battery life than that was the Tab S8 Plus, again, having a great display, but a slightly smaller battery. And that one was coming in at 13 hours. And then the best one out of these was actually the Galaxy Tab S8 Regular, being the less demanding display and the slightly thicker design. Now, something else I noticed with these is that the Galaxy Tab S8 Regular, although it has thicker bezels, I found it to be almost a little bit beneficial when you're holding the tablet because it gives you a spot for your thumbs to rest without having any accidental presses. And I think this kind of ties into what Samsung was really expecting you to use each of these tablets for. So the Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra, it makes sense. It's going to probably be in a case and used more like a laptop, whereas the Tab S8 Regular is more likely to be handheld. But the screen size is not the only difference between these models. If you look at the Galaxy Tab S8 versus the S8 Ultra, you'll notice two main things. The first one is that the bezels are much narrower all the way around the Ultra, which is really nice. It gives you a better screen to body ratio. And two, you actually have a very small notch on the top. And in that notch, you have two cameras. So unlike the Tab S8 and S8 Plus, the Ultra has not only a wide angle, but also an ultra wide angle lens on the front. We'll get into a test in a second, and you'll see that it has an extra feature on there. And this is really one of the main software features you're going to see that's different about the Ultra. And this is similar to Apple's Center Stage. It essentially allows you to auto frame. So if you're walking around or you have multiple people in frame, when you're on a Zoom call or a Google Duo, whatever you might be using, if you're in a call, in a video call, it can frame automatically based on who is around you and how wide it actually needs to crop out to. So I think that's really interesting. Additionally, when you look at the sides of these, you'll see another kind of cutback that they had to make for the Tab S8 Regular that you don't see on the Ultra and on the Plus, and that is in how you would sign in biometrically. So on the Galaxy Tab S8, you actually have a fingerprint sensor on the button, on the power button, which I know some people actually like better, and I think for myself, I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm indifferent. I like it, and I really need to try both these a little bit longer before I decide which one I like better. Anyway, the button is where the fingerprint sensor is located on for the Tab S8, and then the Plus and the Ultra have an in-screen fingerprint sensor. Interestingly, it's an optical fingerprint sensor, unlike Samsung's phones. So that's, if your hands are wet or something like that, it's not going to be ideal. But still, having the in-screen fingerprint sensor can be a little bit easier, I guess. It's a little bit more reachable in a normal tablet hold. But as soon as you put it up as a laptop, I kind of think the button might actually be a little bit better there. Regardless, an interesting drawback of the Tab S8 Ultra is that it only comes in one color. Additionally, it's sold out in most places as well right now, so clearly very popular. But there are three colors for the Regular and for the Plus, which I think for a lot of people that want to style their tablets a little bit more, I think that makes sense. And I think it makes sense that Samsung only went with one color with the Ultra because if you're getting the Ultra, odds are you're going to be getting a keyboard with it and you're going to want to use it a little bit more like a laptop. But let's actually test out the speakers and see how different they actually sound between the Galaxy Tab S8 and the S8 Ultra. So as you can tell, the difference in the speakers was really not that noticeable. So this is what the Galaxy Tab S8 Regular looks and sounds like with the front-facing camera. But the Galaxy Tab Ultra is actually able to shoot in 4K with the main lens here. And here's a sample video of Center Stage working. This is a screen recording, so I didn't capture the audio. But as I move around, it follows me really well for the most part. Although it is a little bit jolty. I wish they would dial it back just a little bit so it wasn't so intense and it didn't like zoom so far into my face. But I think there's a lot of potential here. As far as features go, besides the reframing that I talked about on the S8 Ultra for video calls, and besides the fingerprint sensors, there's really not a lot of feature differences here. They're all running the latest One UI, like I mentioned earlier, but something is going to be different with the internal specs of these when you start to try to upgrade them. So you have 8 GB of RAM on the Regular and the Plus, But if you get the Ultra, you can upgrade that to either 12 gigs or 16 gigs as well. So again, if you're trying to use it more like a laptop, the Ultra is going to give you that extra RAM that I think might be really helpful. Typically, I don't talk a lot about prices in videos like this because it's just so different all around the world. So you guys can leave a comment and let me know what the prices look like in your country. But here in the United States, it's $700 for the Tab S8. That's the base price, $900, so an extra $200 to go to the Plus, which is giving you, again, the in-screen fingerprint sensor, the bigger display, or bigger and better display. And then you're looking at another $200 jump up to the Tab S8 Ultra. And if you really max out the Ultra, you're getting $1,400 is how much that's costing. So a massive price difference, literally double the price of the regular Galaxy Tab S8. But I think in conclusion, between these three, which one is actually the best one to get? Well, I think obviously it's going to come down to what you're using these tablets for. If you're somebody who is using it mostly for like watching movies on the plane, if you want to have something like a little side device for on the go, and you're not trying to replace your laptop or anything like that, then the Tab S8 regular is definitely giving you the best bang for your buck. You're getting almost identical specs across the board with, really a few exceptions. And so I think it's really one of the best deals for tablets out there. Now, if you are not worried about money at all and you plan on trying to replace your laptop, the Tab S8 Ultra is going to give you that wider keyboard and obviously a lot more functionality with a really great display, much larger real estate so you can actually do multitasking on there. And that second camera, I think I hope software updates really improve the center stage feature or the auto framing feature, but for now, it's still nice to have. And I always hate to pick the middle model here. I would say for most people, your best bet is definitely going to be the Tab S8 Plus. I would say that it's still large enough that you can get some laptop style work done. You're getting a better display than the smaller model. You're getting that in-screen fingerprint sensor, and you're saving another $200 or $300 by not getting the Tab S8 Ultra. So out of these three, which one do you think is the best? Leave a comment down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. I'm Mike O'Brien. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.